There is a particular relief that arrives when you close the door, not the relief of finishing something or of rest, but something older and stranger, the relief of no longer being observed, the relief of no longer needing to be coherent. We do not often admit this. We speak of loneliness as deprivation, and we mean it. But somewhere beneath that admission, many of us harbor a quiet, almost shameful knowledge that solitude is not merely something we endure, it is something we choose. We choose it again and again over the risk of being truly known. The question worth asking is why. Michel de Montaigne, the 16th century Frenchman who more or less invented the personal essay, spent the last decades of his life in a tower. He had a library up there, and he wrote. He wrote about his digestion, his fears, his memories, the shape of his opinions on any given day. He was, by all available evidence, content. And yet what strikes the modern reader is not his contentment, but its source. Montaigne was most himself when he was alone with himself, which is to say, when he was alone with the project of trying to describe himself. The essay for Montaigne was not a performance. It was the closest thing to genuine self-knowledge available to a human being who understood, viscerally, from long practice, that the self is unreliable, contradictory, and perpetually in motion. He wrote, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." He meant it literally. To belong to oneself is a kind of property arrangement, and like all property arrangements, it is precarious. Other people have a way of annexing you. They do this not through malice, but through attention, through care, through the sincere and often violent desire to understand who you are. And you, wanting to be understood, trying to be understood, will find yourself performing a version of yourself for them. The performance is not dishonest, but it is not quite you either. Something essential gets rearranged in the telling. Consider what it means to be understood, not merely recognized, not merely agreed with, but understood, held in another mind with accuracy and completeness. It sounds like what we want. In our most desperate moments, it is exactly what we beg for. But the experience of it, when it arrives, is almost never the relief we imagined. It is something closer to exposure. Someone has seen you, and now the seeing cannot be undone. You are no longer protected by your own ambiguity. There is a reason we flinch when someone describes us too precisely. Even when they are correct, perhaps especially when they are correct, we resist. We say they have misunderstood us, that they are oversimplifying, that they are projecting. Some of this is ego, but some of it is something more fundamental. We feel correctly that any description of us is necessarily a reduction of us. The self, encountered from the inside, is a shifting and boundless thing, full of contradictions held in suspension. The self, encountered from the outside, is a story with a beginning and a logic and a character who behaves in consistent ways. These are not the same creature, and when someone claims to understand us, what they are really saying is that they have made peace with the second version, that they find the story sufficient. Something in us knows this is not enough. Montaigne understood this problem intimately. He spent his working life attempting to write himself down and arrived at a paradox he could never resolve. Every essay was both a faithful portrait and already out of date. He was not who he had been when he began writing it. The man who finished the sentence was not the man who had started it. If self-description fails even when we are the author of it, what hope does another person have? To be understood by someone else is to be fixed in place, pinned to a description that is already, in some subtle way, wrong. Here is what we are actually afraid of. We are afraid not just of being misunderstood, though we are afraid of that deeply, the way a person raised on precision fears sloppiness, but of something more treacherous. We are afraid that the understanding will be correct, and that we will not like what is correctly understood. To be alone is to be free from this verdict. In solitude, we remain in a state of permanent possibility. We have not yet been assessed. No one has held up the evidence of our lives and arranged it into a coherent argument about what kind of person we are. We can still believe, in the privacy of our own minds, that we are more generous than we have been, more courageous, more open, more good. Other people, through their perceiving, their remembering, their pattern finding, threaten this open verdict. They are, without meaning to be, the court in which we are always on trial. The sentence, when it comes, is rarely cruel. That would be easier. What they offer instead is something like compassion. They see your flaws and love you anyway, which is perhaps the most vertiginous experience available to a human being, because it means the flaws have been registered. They are now part of the record. You cannot undo it by simply being better tomorrow, because the tomorrow you will be understood through the lens of the yesterday you, forever. Understanding, once given, accumulates. This is its gift and its menace. Montaigne wrote that each person carries within them the whole condition of humanity. He meant this as consolation, a reminder that our private strangeness is universal, that our contradictions are not aberrations, but the very substance of being human. But there is another way to read it. If each of us carries the whole condition of humanity, then the weight we carry is not small. We carry the capacity for cruelty alongside the capacity for tenderness. We carry vanity and its antidote. We carry the knowledge of death and the daily, elaborate business of ignoring it. All of this is inside us, simultaneous, and mostly we manage not to look at it directly. Solitude allows us to be in the presence of this totality without having to account for it. In company, we must account for it. We must select. The self we offer in conversation is always a selected self, a few threads pulled from the whole cloth and held up to the light. We are not lying, but we are necessarily simplifying. And the simplification is exhausting, not because it is dishonest, but because the discrepancy between the simplified version and the whole one is felt as a kind of loneliness, even in the midst of connection, especially in the midst of connection. You are there with another person, speaking, being heard, and somewhere inside you, the untranslatable remainder sits quietly and waits. This is the particular grief of intimacy. The closer someone comes, the more visible the gap becomes between who you actually are and who can be put into language. Solitude removes this grief. There is no gap in solitude because there is no translation in progress. You are simply what you are, held in the suspension of your own privacy, with no one to fail to fully reach. And yet, Montaigne did not stay in his tower forever. He descended. He had a wife, a daughter, a best friend, the writer La Boétie, whose death he mourned with such ferocity that he wrote one of the most devastating friendship essays in the language. When asked why he loved La Boétie, he offered the most famous non-answer in all of philosophy. Because it was him, because it was me, not because of anything he could point to or describe, because of something that exceeded language entirely. This is the paradox he lived inside. He knew that solitude was necessary, that belonging to oneself was the foundation of everything. He also knew that the self which belongs to itself is not the whole self. Some part of us only exists in relation. Some part of us comes into being only when it is witnessed, however imperfectly, by another. We are not fully real to ourselves when we are alone. We are real in a different way, more private, more complete, more protected, but less real in the sense of being confirmed, of having our existence reflected back to us from the outside and recognized as something actual. Being understood, even inadequately, is how we know we are here. So, the choice is not really between solitude and connection. It is between two different kinds of incompleteness. Alone, we are whole but unconfirmed. Together, we are confirmed but reduced. Neither state is sufficient. Neither state is the full truth of us. What Montaigne seemed to arrive at, not as a resolution because he distrusted resolutions, was something like a practice. He went to his tower, he wrote himself down, badly and then better, with his contradictions intact. Then he descended. He brought his written self into contact with the world and let the contact damage the portrait a little. Then he went back up. He was, in this way, always in motion between the two incompletions, never settling, never pretending either one was enough. Perhaps this is all that can be honestly said, that solitude feels safer than being understood because it is safer, and safety of this kind is not nothing. It is not cowardice, exactly. It is the reasonable response of a self that has noticed how much is at stake in being seen, how much can be lost, reduced, fixed in place. The self protects itself. This is what selves do. But the protection has a cost. To remain unseen is to remain, in some crucial respect, unreal. The door that keeps the world out also keeps us in. And there is something in us, the same something that drove Montaigne down from his tower, that drove him toward friendship and toward the sentence that exceeds his own understanding, that cannot bear to stay inside forever, that goes on needing, despite everything, to be approximately known by at least one other person. Not perfectly known, not fully known, just approximately, just enough to confirm that the thing living behind the closed door is actually there. This is the terrible kindness that other people offer us. They see us wrong, and we are grateful. We are grateful because being seen wrong is still being seen, and being seen, even inadequately, is still being real. That is what we go back to them for, again and again, after all our time alone, not understanding. Just the fact of existing in someone else's eyes, however briefly, however imperfectly, however far short of the whole truth of us they inevitably fall.